What is Human Rights Day? By a show of hands, does anyone know? You don't have to explain, I'm just curious. Oh, okay, I don't feel like I'm in bad company then. I feel like I literally just learned of it, right? And then I had I began to have trouble wrapping my mind around the concept of Human Rights Day. Now, while it may seem practical to you, to me, I struggle with the idea that humans are the policy making species on the planet. And yet this day did not come into being until 1948. Alligators can't make policy. Dogs can't make policy. Cats can't make, humans can make policy. 1948, folks. Humans been around a long time. This year, as we mark the 76th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are called to reflect on both its enduring promise and the unfinished work it challenges us to undertake. Human rights today are both a beacon of hope and an area of persistent struggle. And while the modern world has seen significant advancements in protecting and promoting fundamental rights, the challenges that remain continue to be rooted in systemic inequalities and political oppression. Now, Human Rights Day was born out of a world scarred by the atrocities of World War II. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was a response to the profound suffering and a bold statement of hope. It declared that all people, regardless of race, gender, nationality, or status, are entitled to fundamental rights: the right to life, liberty, and security, the right to freedom from torture and discrimination, the right to education and work. Now, we know that in December 2024, a lot of these freedoms are at risk for millions of humans. For the first time ever in 1948, nations collectively affirmed that human dignity is universal. And so this document, drafted with input from diverse cultures and philosophies, served as a moral compass for the world. And even Eleanor Roosevelt co-signed this document. A key figure in its creation, Eleanor Roosevelt, called it the Magna Carta for all mankind. As Unitarian Universalists, we honor the UDHR as a reflection of our own principles, right? The belief in the equity and compassion and justice, and our commitment to a world community where all can flourish. Now, some of you might remember where America was in 1948. Most of us don't, but I'll explain. It was a time of post-World War II recovery. It was also a time of the early stringings of the civil rights movement, not civil war, and the Cold War tensions. And on July 26, 1948, President Harry S. Truman signed an executive order, 9981, desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces. And this was a landmark step towards racial equality in a segregated nation. And also television began to emerge as a dominant cultural force. And while the UDHR laid a foundation, the promise of universal human rights remains unrealized for many. Around the world, millions face oppression and poverty, displacement, and violence. Even in societies like America, where we champion human rights and systemic racism and xenophobia. But these things still persist, even in a developed society. But Human Rights Day reminds us that these struggles are not distant, that they are here, alive and thriving in our own communities. Indigenous rights, immigration rights, And the rights of marginalized groups often go unfulfilled, even as we celebrate the principles of equality and justice. It's not right. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to confront these injustices. We are a faith that values action, not just belief. So a question I'd like for you to ponder this morning is, how can we, as individuals and as a community, be allies in the ongoing struggle for human rights? Living a life committed to human rights is not just a political or social endeavor. It is deeply spiritual and should be a part of your daily life as a human, because we all have that in common. This commitment asks us to open our hearts to the suffering of others and to cultivate empathy, courage, and persistence. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who we also honor in this season and the next, reminded us that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And therefore, advocacy for human rights begins in our own lives. It may mean standing up against workplace discrimination, or supporting policies that protect the vulnerable, or volunteering with organizations that serve those in need. And I'm learning that Human Rights Day should invite us to engage in spiritual practices by reflecting on questions like, how do I honor the dignity of others in my life? How can I use my privilege to amplify marginalized voices? How can we as a congregation become more engaged in the global human rights movement? These spiritual practices are important if we intend to grow. Acknowledging the inherent worth and dignity of every human means acknowledging our own privilege and working to uplift the voices on the margins and working to center those voices. Take a look around. About how many marginalized people do you see here? LGBTQIA, raise your hand. Not enough. BIPOC, raise your hand. Not enough. Folks seeking asylum? Not enough. Is it because they don't know we exist? Is it because folks on the margins don't know that a place exists for them that will love them with their flaws and all? Is it because folks on the margins don't know that Unitarian Universalism is a place for them? What's that about? I don't know. But I don't want to go to a place that will only accept me if I color inside the lines. Meaning, I don't want to go to a place that's going to tell me how and what to believe and then tell me I'm going to hell if I don't buy in. I'm going to choose to believe that the Jesus the Bible tells us about died for the sins of all people and not just believers. Because a loving God wouldn't condemn anyone to a life of damnation. But that's the universalist in me. And I'm going to choose to believe that living a moral and ethical life matters, because that's the humanist in me. And while we have a lot of work to do to let folks know that we exist, and we've been here for at least 400 years and evolved out of Christianity, we got a lot of work to do around that. But the point this morning is that Human Rights Day should be practiced daily. And as Unitarian Universalists, we have the privilege every single day, every hour, every moment to practice and embrace our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of all people. No one is exempt from that, and we've been practicing it intentionally for at least 60 years. Having one day dedicated to the rights of humans when humans should have the rights simply by being birthed is a true travesty. And we have a long way to go before we truly learn as a society to accept and love all people. But for now, we can do what we can do as a liberal spiritual community to embrace each and every person who darkens our doorways. And we will do it in a non-judgmental, loving way. And we will also do it through the work of justice. Blessed be, Ashe, Amen, Shalom, and Salam.